Good morning. It's 9 o'clock, and I'm going to call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order. First, we're going to establish that we have a quorum. We have 2 members out this morning, but 5 meets our quorum requirements, so we're going to move forward. Consent agenda. The Commission may request for a consent agenda item to be moved to the regular agenda for presentation and public comment. Otherwise, the consent agenda will be considered in one vote. All items on the consent agenda have been recommended for approval by staff with no opposition received to date. Since some items on the consent agenda may require public hearing, the Commission will accept public comment on any item on the consent agenda in one public hearing. There are 4 items on the consent agenda.
And Chair Scribbling, just sort of a new thing so the public is aware of what was on consent.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to share the maps that just show the plats.
That'd
So we
be
have
great.
the minutes first, and then this is Sagewood Estates. There's a preliminary, and then the final plat is the area in red. No sidewalks or variances, so that's why this is on consent.
Yes, sir.
And then Riverview Estates. Okay, that was it.
Okay. So I'm going to open it up for public comment. Does anyone wish to speak on the consent agenda items? Please come forward, state your name and single member district or address. All right, I'm going to close public comment. Anyone wish to make a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Regular agenda, subdivision plat. Excuse me. The Planning Commission has final authority for approval. Appeals may be directed to the City Council. FP 2209, Phase 1 Fairway Downs. A request for approval of a final plat of Phase 1 Fairway Downs being 37.98 acres located southwest of the intersection of Country Club and South Ratliff Roads.
Good morning, Planning Commission. Jeff Fisher, Chief Planner. Our first case today is a final plat of Fairway Downs. You all approved the preliminary plat back in February, and so this is for the phases, I guess 2 of the 3 phases in that preliminary plat. 37, roughly 38 acres in the ETJ. They have filed applications for annexation, a comprehensive plan amendment, and rezoning, so look for those. Those will probably be coming in next month for review, and this will eventually have zoning on it for mainly residential RS1, and then there's a small piece, 1 lot that's going to be commercial. So this is the plat that you see. This is the commercial lot up here, and then the rest of this, there's 52 single-family lots. All of the lots are at least half an acre each and would comply if they go to RS1. There's 2 variances requested as part of this final plat to allow Country Club to maintain a 24-foot paving width and to allow South Ratliff Road to maintain a 20-foot paving width. Staff is asking for a partial improvement on South Ratliff Road to get to 28, which is half of what the new minimum paving width is, but to give a full variance on Country Club, and we'll go through those rationales now. So there's Country Club Road. The city recently did improvements on it, so even though it's only 24 feet wide, this was part of, I understand, a city project where they put lay down curbs on the side of the road already, so that's been done. This is south of the subject property, and then Ratliff Road right now is very deficient. It's only 20 feet, and then we believe with future development potential there, we would want some widening on that. So it conforms with the comprehensive plan and purpose statements. The paving width, we're completely fine with Country Club. We don't think it's detrimental. 24 feet serves, and again, the city's already done that work. But on Ratliff Road, again, the new street standard would be a minimum of 36 feet, and they're at 20, so half of that is another 8 feet. So we would want them to do 8 feet and get up to 28. Just an FYI, we are reviewing this under the old subdivision standards because they had vested rights of their preliminary plat being approved before the new street standards. It doesn't really change our recommendation, but what it did do is the old standard in this area would not have required a sidewalk on Country Club Road. In order for them to not do the sidewalk, they're under the old standards. But again, what we're asking for in terms of street width remains the same. So staff recommends approval of Phase 1, final plat of Fairway Downs, approval of a full variance to maintain 24 feet on Country Club Road, and then a partial variance to allow 28 feet for Ratliff Road, so requiring additional 8 feet, subject to 11 conditions of approval. I'm going to go over these real quick and just do a summary, as they're obviously a lot more detailed, but this is the general stuff we always look at. Copy of tax cert, make some changes on the plat, note on the plat, the annexation is required to allow city services, which they're doing, install a water main, county health approval for septic systems in this area, a drainage study, improve Country Club or get the variance, improve South Ratliff or get the variance, any internal streets or get a variance. Number 10, just wanted to flag that Fairway Lane is shown on the plat, but our police department and just 911 and everything, we have some other fairways in San Angelo, so we're asking that name be changed. And then 11 is just put a note on the plat if fire hydrants are necessary. This concludes staff's presentation. Any questions or comments?
Anyone have questions for the staff? On the, you noted that there's septic. Do they not have
Correct.
access to city sewer?
Yeah, I can let engineering speak to that too, but my understanding is correct. They're not within they're nowhere near the distance to connect to city sewer. So that's why the lots are half an acre, which would allow them to go on city water but have septic.
Okay.
Correct. On the south side of the Concho River there is no sewer system on that side of the South Concho River. In
Okay.
that entire area.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions? Thank you, Jeff.
Sure.
I'm going to open it up for public comment. If you wish to speak on this case, please state your name and single member district or address.
Yes, sir. Casey Pointer, owner here. Really, the only thing I have to ask is, again, he touched on it, the name Fairway Lane. We would like for that requirement to be removed from the conditions. We had it on our preliminary plat. It's gone through everything, and then now we see it here as a problem. We actually, it's part of our subdivision name, so we would really like to keep that name if we could, but obviously it's not a deal breaker by any means, but we request that y'all take it under consideration to strike that from the requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey.
Hi, I'm Melissa Shaplinsky. I'm the 911 addressing coordinator for the city. I do have a copy of the emails from the sergeant with the police department with his concerns regarding keeping the name, if you guys wanted to see those.
Sure.
Okay. But the main concern is with keeping the name. The dispatchers often, as you said in the email, only get the street name and not the designation, the suffix of it, so they end up going in the wrong direction. So, our only real concern is keeping the public
life
safe.
safety issue.
Right. And
Okay.
Unfortunately, it was on the preliminary plat comments, but it got put in the wrong section under department review, which doesn't go out with the comments to
Okay.
the public. So it has been brought up the whole time. It was on the preliminary, the amended, and the final, and it brought up last time at Planning Commission.
Yes, ma'am.
So just a little concern for the public safety. And we try to work with the public as much as we can with keeping the names. As long as there isn't a previously existing name, it's not similarly sounding, something like that, we'll let them pick the name.
Okay.
So
Is
Thank you.
Fairway Downs taken? Fairway Downs Road?
I'm not sure that it is. I could check on that. Generally, what the developers do is they'll send me some names, even if before they put in the preliminary plat, and we'll let them know if there's going to be any issues or not. And if not, then they can go forward with them. But my email's in the project docs, and I can get that out to him today if he wants to look at some other options that may be similar. But I would also probably want to ask the police department on that one too, just because Fairway Downs, Fairway Lane, it's kind of like how Old Post Circle is, how they have like Old Post Circle Drive, all those are grouped together, so you're all going to the same section. This one, we're going up by Knickerbocker, and this one down here. So, and then the other, with the directional thing, the original one is by Bentwood Country Club, and the other one's by San Angelo Country Club. So if someone says, I'm by the country club,
Yeah,
it's kind of one and the same.
understand.
So, any questions?
Anyone have questions? Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment. So we have a note that the staff has put in on the, can you go back to the notes, please, Jeff?
I don't know if y'all want to wait one moment. I can ask public information. I think the slides are a little bit too low. Do you want me to pause, or do you want me to, I can probably get it out of my staff report, but it looks like it's cut off on the bottom of the note.
Oh, I think it's just the camera. We can see the notes.
Okay. I've got it here anyway.
Or do we?
It is.
I can read it off if you want me to read that. I have it on my staff report.
No, I see that.
Okay.
The screen that we're looking at, Jeff, shows the entire slide. So it has something to do with the lens
Okay.
and the focus. So note 10 says to change Fairway Lane to a different name. That seems to be the item under consideration here. Everything else sounds like the applicant's in agreement with the staff on for recommendations. Personally, when it comes to life safety issues, I'm going to err on caution. If the city emergency responders are concerned about the name of the street and confusion, then I'm going to be concerned about it. I don't want to be responsible for a medical emergency that, you know, we had a delayed response because of name confusion. So I would like to see the applicants work with the city and the responders on getting a name that everyone's comfortable with. So I would like to leave that comment in there personally. But I will defer to you guys. Does anyone wish to make a motion?
No, I agree with you. I think that Fairway Lane being there in Bentwood is a very big road, and they get a lot of calls there, so there would be confusion. So I move to accept as presented by staff, keeping the name or ensuring that Fairway Lane does get changed to the next appropriate name.
We have a motion to approve as presented by the staff. Does anyone want a second?
Second. Okay.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve as presented by the staff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. All right, FP 22-12, Moeller Subdivision. Request for approval of the final plat of the Moeller Subdivision being 1 acre, located at the southwest corner of Pecan Street and East 20th Street, and a variance from Chapter 10-3A2 of the subdivision ordinance to allow East 19th Street, or 19th and a half Street, to maintain a 20-foot paving width.
Thank you, Chair Stribling. So our next case today, the Moeller Subdivision. This is zoned RS1. This is an infill development. It was 2 remainders, so it's never actually been platted. It's just a really old ownership tracts surveyed. So they want to cut this up. There's a house far to the east and then a house far to the west. So they want to make those 2 lots and then one in the middle, so they'll get a total of 3. So this is a good structures plan that they've provided us that show the new lots. They do meet all the setbacks, so they're good with RS1. Again, it's just an infill development to basically squeeze another home in there, and they do meet all of the requirements. Minimums are 50-foot lots in RS1, and they're actually 70 feet wide, lots 2 and 3. They are requesting a variance on 19 and a half, so went out, took some pictures. 19 and a half is kind of interesting. It only goes 2 blocks. It serves as rear access, though, for some of the restaurants and landscape businesses to the south. And then to the north, it also serves as rear driveways for some of the homes. So it's still being used at this time, and we are in support of a partial variance, but it being only 20 feet, we'd like to get an extra 3 feet to 23. And if the owners on the south side go to replat, they'll get the other 3, so we can bring it up to that minimum of 26. Just an FYI on that too, the minimum standard in the new street section of the ordinance is 26 feet. It's not always a guarantee though. Planning and engineering and the other departments have to agree. In this case, we are comfortable with a partial variance on the street. This is Pecan Street. Pecan meets the minimums and 20th meets the minimum, so we're not going to worry about those. So the rationale for the variance, the additional 3 feet will just close the gap in the deficient width on that street. Like I say, if we give a variance to them, then we've got to give a variance to everybody, so we think that's reasonable. And again, 19.5 Street is used for rear access. No hardship exists. There's no existing curbs they'd have to tear out to do that. Staff recommends approval of the Moeller Subdivision and approval of a partial variance to allow a 23-foot paving width for East 19.5 Street, an existing local street, in lieu of the required 26, requiring additional 3 feet. Subject to 3 conditions of approval: tax certificate, remove the second driveway. Right now, the driveway is half on one lot and half on the other, so they either have to submit something to basically remove that, or show that there's a common access easement to allow that. And then 3 is, again, 19.5, either they construct it or they seek or they get the variance. Any questions or comments on this one?
Questions for the staff? All right. Thank you, Jeff. We're going to open it up for public comment.
Good morning, Russell with SKG. We would ask for your approval of this subdivision and the variance as requested. The 19.5 Street almost functions more like an alley, than anything, but it is classified as a street. So we understand staff's position on asking for the 3 feet, but we would ask for your approval of the variance as requested, and happy to answer any questions.
Are these houses going to front 20th?
Yes, sir. There's currently 2 structures on there, so they'll continue to front 20th, and then the additional one between them would also front 20th. Thank you.
I'm just going to go back to the aerial map so you all can see this area and kind of what's going on here. So Esperanza, which is this restaurant here, has rear access, and I believe it's this one, this landscape business here, has rear access. And then on the north side of 19.5, you can see there's some rear driveways here. So that's really your question is, do you think it's worth the extra 3 feet? We do, or knowing that it's only 2 blocks, do you seek the variance? And y'all's decision, I guess.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment. Anyone wish to make a motion?
It looks to me like it basically is an alley. I mean, it looks like an alley.
Are there any, you said this is 2 city blocks. Are there any residences that have primary access on 19th and a half?
There are, if you go west of Oak Street and to Volney. I'm sorry that picture doesn't go all the way out, but I did check that, and there is at least 1 home that has access on 19.5. Now again, on this block, no, none of the homes or businesses have front access on 19.5. So it would only be the block west of Oak Street.
Okay.
Jeff, is there any opportunity for new development on that street anymore? I mean, that one we understand it's being replatted, but looks like everything else is built out and it's functioned effectively up to this time.
That's correct. This would be as far as we know, driving out there, this is the last block or the last property that is vacant. Once they fill this in, that's it.
I don't really see a need to add the paving, just because it, like you said, it's almost serves as an alley, and it's functioned this way already.
It's an infill.
Yeah. So, I move that we accept as presented with the variance.
Okay. We have a motion to to accept as the staff's recommended with a full variance for the paving width of 19th and a half street.
Second.
And a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0. RP 22-12, replat of the east 50 feet of lots 1, 2, and 3, block 21, Lakeview Addition, and the 50 feet immediately north of lot 1. The request for approval of a replat of the east 50 feet of lots 1, 2, and 3, block 21, Lakeview Addition, and the 50 feet of the land immediately north of lot 1, and variance from chapter 10.3A2 of the subdivision ordinance to allow Oaklawn Street to maintain a 24-foot paving width.
Good morning, Commissioners. Rafael Alvarado with the Planning Department. This is Lakeview Addition, Block 21. It is 0.460 acres. That's the satellite image on the left there. These are it's in a residential single-family neighborhood. This is the notification map for the property for the case. Being a residential replat in a single-family residential zone, we are required to send out notification letters. We did not receive any in support or opposition. And this is the proposed replat. There is a request for a variance on the paving width for Oaklawn, which is this street here. The paving width currently measures 24 feet, and as Jeff mentioned, the ordinance only allows 26 feet paving width. So on this image on the right here is Oaklawn. It's 24 foot without curb or gutter. So staff recommends approval of RP 22-12 Lakeview Addition, subject to 2 conditions of approval. The first is the requirement for a tax certificate, and the second is the Oaklawn paving width and variance denial. Are there any other questions for staff?
Anyone have questions for the staff? Can you go back to the aerial photo?
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
So the street that we're talking about sides this lot. It's not the frontage. Is that correct?
That's correct. Just one there.
And that street is 24 feet wide?
Yes.
Is it 24 feet wide for the blocks in this aerial north and south of the site? Or does
That's a good
vary?
point. Down here, it looks as if, to the south on Oaklawn, it looks as if it was improved. It has curb and gutter, and it's greater than 24 feet wide. Further to the north, I believe around 45th Street is when it reduces in width.
In what block does it have curb and gutter?
I'm not entirely sure. I believe 45th is where that changes. It might be further south.
And then it narrows as it moves north?
There's
So
a certain point at which it narrows. I noticed it in the satellite image, but once you're out there, this is the street here. Close to the school, to Lakeview, that's where the street is wider. That would be further south along Oaklawn.
Okay. Anyone else have questions for the staff? All right. Thank you, Rafael. You can leave that up if you don't mind. We're going to open it up for public comment.
Good morning, Erica Carter with CFE. Couple of things. The report I got didn't ever say there was a denial of the variance. And that was even after I emailed and requested. And I just got that report before this meeting started, and it still doesn't have anything where there was a denial of the variance.
Okay.
This is a existing residence. It's an elderly lady that's just cleaning up her lot, trying to combine it all. She owns the whole lot, but it was not ever replatted to encompass all of the different properties. So my rationale for keeping Oak Lawn as it is would be that there's not going to be any more traffic increase based on this one lot. If you'll look right across the street on Oak Lawn, that's a developed lot. So the odds of the other side ever being widened as well, well, that just, it probably won't happen. This is an infill area also, and so I believe that putting the installation of widening the street on this one lady here is really just not feasible. So all she's trying to do is clean up her property. Thank you. Do you have any
Erica,
questions?
are there existing improvements on any of the lot?
No.
Or is it a fully 2 vacant lots?
No, the lots are, there's a house. There's already a residence. There's no,
And the house is, so we're replatting. She's going to have a house that's already developed on one lot, and she's going to have a vacant lot next to it?
yes, no. She should be having, can you go back to the replat?
Yeah, I think it's just
They're
one
just
lot.
combining the whole
Yeah.
thing.
We're
So,
combining it.
yes, so she owns all of it, but it was never platted, or it was platted but never replatted into one lot.
Okay. So what does the current plat show?
If you can see, there's portions on there, there's the square lines, or
On
the
the west
squares
side
there.
of the
That's
lot?
what, yeah, that's kind of how it was broken up, and then the other half. So it really is like 1, 2, like 5 different pieces.
Okay.
All she's doing is combining it into one.
And why
property.
is she having to replat this lot?
She wants to. She wants to, I guess she's getting her estate and everything in order, and it was recommended that she do this.
Okay.
Just to have everything clean and platted in one lot.
Okay. Does she own the land to the west?
No.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
Thank you, Erica. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment. You guys understand what she's doing here? On the surface, it looks like there's really no change, except from a legal standpoint. So I'm inclined to allow things to remain as they are.
Well, he's really downsizing, I mean, from all those existing lots.
Right.
You have fewer lots now. There's no reason to expect that there's an increase in traffic. I'll move approval of the street width variance.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve with a variance for Oak Lawn Street to remain as it is. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Next case, RP 2216, Moeller Subdivision, Section 1B. Request for approval of a replat, Moeller Subdivision, Section 1B, being 11.539 acres, northeast of Lake Drive and West 48th Street, and a variance from Chapter 10.3A2 of the subdivision ordinance to allow Lake Drive to maintain a 22-foot paving width.
Thank you, Chair Stribling, Commissioners. Our next case today is the Moeller Subdivision, Section 1B. So this is a partial replat, really, if you will. The bottom two lots were slightly reconfigured, but portions of them were already platted in this subdivision called Moeller Section 1B. They're now reconfiguring those bottom two lots and then adding 3 more lots. So it's a total from going from 4 lots essentially to 5. Zoning is ranch and estate. It's about 11.5 acres. So here's the lot configurations. And the way they did this is basically just got a lot of different owners that are involved in this process and existing homes and structures. And so this was just a way to, I guess, to replat this. All of the lots are minimum of 1 acre for ranch and estate and would allow further development. So 8 is kind of wonky, I know, but you'll basically have, so 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so 5 lots. 48th Street is good. It's got curbs, lay down curbs, and it's already paved to the minimum, but Lake Drive is not. So they've requested a variance to maintain 22 feet, similar to some of the other cases. Especially in this one, there's a lot of potential future development on both sides to the north with that industrial and commercial zoning. We do want an additional 2 feet to close that gap to get a little closer to 26. Otherwise, no issues. This one needed a mail out because it was on ranch and estate for a replat. 17 notices were mailed out, 1 in support from the subject property owner under 12. So she owns the 3 properties that are identified there as 12. So that's 1 in support from the owner. East on West 48th, as you can see, that's already got lay down curb and is paved to full standard. North on Lake Drive. So Lake Drive needs to be a minimum of 26 in the ordinance, and they're currently at 22. So we wanted the additional 2 feet. If you go to get to 24, if you go to the very bottom, I measured it, it is actually roughly 24 on that end. As you continue to go further north, not just because of the view, but it does actually narrow. So in essence, if we do grant the partial variance, they would have to pave the additional 2 feet, but it wouldn't be a full 2 feet. It might start at 2 feet and then taper down to 1 foot. Rationale on this one, R&E zoning is consistent with the future rural land use, so no issues there. The additional 2 feet would close the gap in width and allow future development to occur. Staff recommends approval of a Moeller Subdivision Section 1B and approval of a partial variance to allow a 24-foot paving width for Lake Drive, an existing local street, in lieu of the required 26, so requiring an additional 2 feet. Subject to 6 conditions as outlined. Tax certificate, revise the plat to show the right-of-way width, front yard setbacks. The lots are 1 acre in size, and then the third owner, although they had signed the plat, weren't identified on the plat. Revise the structures plan. So one of the issues is some of those small buildings do encroach over the lot lines, and then one of them actually encroaches over the other property. So they'll have to remove all those, verify that before the plat can be recorded. Drainage study, improve Lake Drive or get a variance. Existing buildings to meet fire separation distance. And then a note, additional hydrant required if the structures exceed 600 feet. That comment is important, in particularly for Lot 8, which is if they were to build a home or a new structure way in the back, they're going to be more than 600 feet from a hydrant, so that could be an issue. It may not be an issue if they leave everything the way it is. This concludes our presentation. Any questions?
The note for the fire hydrant, is that only for new improvements?
Correct, yes.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have questions? I'm going to open it up for public comment.
Good morning, Russell with SKG. This is kind of similar to the previous case. Elderly lady and the neighbors trying to clean up, sell off some land, give the land to some friends and neighbors, and so there's really not proposing to make any substantial improvements as part of this. Some of the structures, if you look at Lot 4 and the existing Lot 3 that kind of face West 48th Street, there's 2, it looks like that's one big structure, but that's kind of 2 separate small little outbuildings in the back that don't really, it's some that's kind of been like that for years. And so to change that, we would kind of ask, I don't know if we need to ask for your approval or variance from that. And then let me find the conditions of approval. The existing buildings meet fire separation distance, relocate or remove. There is a, I'm gonna call it a little, let me see. This little building kind of right there, if you look at the imagery, it's it's kind of right in the middle of that field. It's almost, I'm gonna call it a goat shed or a little ag building for their livestock. So it's, I believe it's about the only building. There's a fire hydrant down here at this area, and then there's one up here. So it's a little bit over the 600-foot hose lay. So we would ask that the condition for these buildings to be relocated or removed. If we don't do anything today, the condition still stays the same. So we would ask that one condition of approval be stricken.
Can you go to the conditions, please,
Yeah,
Russell?
absolutely.
I want to clarify, Chair Stribling, our comment earlier. So there's two conditions. So you asked about the note. So the note was from the fire department, fire marshal's office, about putting in an additional hydrant if new structures exceed 600 feet. However, now we're talking about number 6. It does say existing buildings need to meet the distance, and that's from building permits. So there's two different departments that had two different things going on. So they are saying, I guess, that they do want any existing buildings, I guess, to meet fire separation distance.
Is that the one structure that doesn't meet it?
That doesn't, the fire separation distance and 600 feet from a hydrant are different notes. I was asking about the distance from the fire hydrant, and you were saying that was for new structures only?
That's my understanding. I'd prefer if the fire marshal's office could answer that. I just don't want to be incorrect, but I believe that's true.
Okay.
That is correct, and I don't think Mr. Coleman's here to represent them today, but that was the discussion that staff had, is that it would be for new structures, and it's particularly that Lot 8, if a new structure was built somewhere back down that long road.
Yes, sir.
Now, it sounds like that's not the case, and so maybe there's in the future, that would just be looked at during a building permit when they submit their site plan for a residential building, if they chose to do that at that time.
The no is what we put on pretty much all the plats nowadays about any new structures. I guess still what's concerning to us is item 6, the existing buildings.
Right.
And so to me, I believe before we could get that one building out in the middle of that little field would have to be removed. That's where we were seeing comment 6 being geared towards, was that.
Correct, yes.
That building. So we would ask that.
I don't understand that. That doesn't seem, there doesn't seem to be a fire separation issue with that structure.
Well, it's fire separation, and maybe I'm just reading it wrong and confused by it, but.
I believe number 6 deals with that Lot 3 that's not part of the plat, and Lot 4, I think, on the southern end that faces 48. Those, like you said, those two outbuildings that are kind of built side by side. So the building code says when there's a new property line or a true property line created, they have to be separated by a minimum of 5 feet. Usually,
Do we have side setback issues?
Possibly.
So it's the
I
little building?
think it's those two, yes, sir. I don't think it's the one out in the field. I think that one is.
Yeah, Aaron's right.
Separated.
They're two different comments. So it's not about the 600 feet on that one. It's just, and that's good because that matches what planning says. So any of those structures that are encroaching over
Here we go.
a lot line or encroaching into the right of way just need to be pushed back and meet the setbacks. So when they meet planning stuff, they should meet permits as well.
So Russell, it looks like Lot 5 has a structure sitting on the line between 4 and 5. And 4 has a structure sitting on the line between 4 and 3, which isn't part of this replat.
The structure at 3 and 4 is actually kind of two structures, but they almost have grown together over time.
Okay.
So yeah, so this is revolving around creating that separation, I guess, between these outbuildings, not necessarily the one little loner out on Lot 6.
Exactly.
Right, correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's the separation of structures is what it looks like.
Okay.
What's the structure? So the structure on 4 that's joining into 3 and the structure on 5 that is right on the line next to 4. Would those structures be removed or relocated as part of this replat?
It wasn't their original intent, but I guess it's something they're gonna have to do if they want to get this plat recorded and filed of record, so. Just some storage buildings, just some little outbuildings of sorts, accessory structures.
So I think we as city staff can look at those and work with the building official and planning to look at our ordinances to say, how do we look at those accessory structures? What does that separation really need to be? You know,
Okay.
house difference, 5 feet, but accessory structures normally can be a little closer to property lines. And so maybe we just need to evaluate that a little bit further to make sure that they do meet the setbacks. Because I think that's the goal, is that they just meet the setbacks, and how do we accomplish that?
Right.
So if we could just maybe then kind of amend that or add on to that as some sort of effort working with staff to verify what that entails of sorts, or maybe that's adequate there. I'd emailed the city engineer asking for a deferral of the drainage study, so hopefully we'll get a deferral back from them. We don't know of any improvements they're looking to do. This was just there again, trying to clean up, get some property situated amongst neighbors and friends and relatives before as they're getting old, and kind of preparation for that, the end times planning. So
you'd like to defer the drainage study?
To a later stage of development is kind of what we're allowed to do,
If
because
stuff changes.
because we don't know of any improvements that they're going to be making out there.
Okay.
As part of this. This is more of just kind of setting property lines in place and establishing correct and properly platted boundaries for that. And then we would ask also for the approval of the Lake Drive addition. It's a pretty narrow stretch of road. If you kind of look back at those photographs, where it's right kind of hugging it, and like Jeff said, if you look at at this portion of the road, here's kind of where it's wider, and then it slowly kind of narrows down as you project to the back. So it's just kind of a narrow lane through there. So we just asked for that variance. I guess if not, we'll figure out how to scab on a couple feet of pavement on the edge of that there. So be happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thanks, Russell. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right. Can we go back to the comments? Because it looks like we've got a lot of discussion here.
Yep.
Okay, so revised structures plan removing all encroachments. Is there an encroachment,
Yes.
and where is it? Is it the same structure we were talking about earlier between 3 and 4?
Yes, between 3 and 4. And also, there's one on Lot 5. It looks like it's a very small building, but it does actually encroach into the right-of-way. So one encroachment's in the right-of-way, and then one's over lot lines.
Oh, I see it now.
Yeah, so that would be just over the building on Lot 5 for an encroachment into the city right-of-way.
Okay.
If it actually is, they surveyed, so we assume that it is.
Okay. All right.
Jeff, as far as ownership, is it a single owner at this point, or is it multiple owners?
It's multiple owners.
Between 3 and 4 specifically?
Yes, I believe there's at least 3. There's definitely 3 different owners. And so I think a couple of them are owned by 2 of the people, and then one of the lots is owned by a separate party.
Okay.
All right. You go back to the notes again, please.
So that drainage study deferral would be up to the city engineer on number 4.
Yeah. Generally speaking, when it comes to replatting like this, I'm not opposed to cleaning up a mess like we're seeing here, and allowing some leeway with some of the ordinances. Where I get concerned is when we start adding development or improvements into the area. So generally speaking, that's my viewpoint. Does anyone wish to tackle this, this motion?
I'm good with everything except that number 6 on what to do with it. I don't have a problem with it.
I feel like if we leave the comment like it is and allow them to work with the staff to
Okay.
meet the requirements, it would be okay. Are you in agreement with that, Russell?
As long as we leave the goat shed alone.
I'd like to move that we accept as presented. I'd like to defer the drainage study to later development.
Later development, sounds good.
And I also would like to,
I'm not sure the planning commission has the authority to defer the drainage study. It has to come from the city engineer.
Okay.
and I'd like for that, but
Yeah,
I don't.
I know that request has been made.
Okay,
That's correct, but I have no opposition
okay.
to deferring that.
Okay, so the city staff's agreed to
Yeah.
allow the deference or the deferral?
Also, the variance on Lake Drive,
Yes.
I'd like to grant the variance on it.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve deferring the drainage study until future development.
That's not within the scope of this board's authority.
Okay?
Okay. So,
I will work with Russell.
okay, I'll amend that, I guess, not
Okay.
say that.
So we have a motion to approve, granting the variance on Lake Drive.
So what'll happen is, my apologies, that comment will stay the same for now on the drainage study, and then they'll work that out privately with the city engineer.
Okay.
Okay.
So we have a motion to approve granting a variance on Lake Drive. Anyone wish to make a second to that motion?
I think that met it. I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Related comprehensive plan amendments and rezoning. City Council has final authority for approval of comprehensive plan amendments and rezoning 1701 South Concho Drive. Looks like two cases. CP 2202 1701 South Concho Drive. Request for approval of an amendment to the comprehensive plan, changing certain lands from the rural to neighborhood future land use, being 122.36 acres located at 1701 South Concho Drive, and Z 2208 1701 South Concho Drive, a request for approval of a rezoning from ranch and estate to single-family residential zoning district for 30.24 acres located at 1701 South Concho Drive.
Thank you, Chair Stribling, Planning Commission. We're going to do this as one presentation. So this is a comprehensive plan amendment and a zone change. These lots are currently designated in our future land use plan as rural and zoned ranch and estate, which fits with the rule. They have plans of subdivision that they're working on for this area. Subdivision lots hooking up onto city services is going to require potentially smaller lots. They're going to have a little bit less than the 150, and so they want to do just bring that into the RS1 zoning. And so that is what we're looking at today, is just the top layer of all this, the comp plan and the zoning, and then the plots will be dealt with later. So this is south of Knickerbocker on the west side of Concho. So they want to change it's basically two properties, a total of 122 acres. They want to change all of it from rural to neighborhood. But only the north roughly 30 acres is actually in the city right now. So in the future, they could annex in the south portion. So they want to clean up the comp plan and allow neighborhoods, so it'll all become from green to yellow. And that'll allow them to do a rezoning, but they're just going to zone the front portion for now, as the back portion can't be zoned yet because it's not annexed into the city. 7 notices were mailed out on the comp plan and 6 on the zoning, no responses. This is south on South Concho Drive and north on Concho Drive. So the street is existing, it's 26 feet, so it meets the minimum, so no variance. Has not been curbed or guttered, but it's been existing for a long time. So that's both sides of the street. Looking west at the subject property, it is very close to the airport, so we are looking at those issues on the platting side of things. And then this is east at the Marina. Rationale for approval, at this stage it's pretty simple. There's neighborhood and RS1 zoning immediately to the north. So this is really just a logical extension. I think it's time to change that. This is kind of on the cusp of San Angelo, but it is becoming a little bit more urban. So changing the comp plan to neighborhood and the zoning to RS1 fits with the area. The associated subdivision plats are 1 acre, so they'll easily comply with RS1. Portions of the lots are within the floodplain, but we will be addressing that through the platting and permitting process. Staff recommends approval of an amendment to our comprehensive plan for all of the 122.36 acres from rural to neighborhood, and then approval of a rezoning for just the north 30.24 acres from ranch and estate R&E to single-family RS1. And just a note, prior to development, subdivision plats are required to be submitted. This is still surveyed land, and have those approved and recorded. Any questions on these?
What's the minimum lot size for ranch and estate?
For ranch and estate is 1 acre.
Okay. And these are going to be 1 acre lots?
Correct, but they don't have the lot width. Some of the lot widths are going to be less than 150 feet wide.
Okay.
So that and just connecting to services, they figured they'll have more flexibility going into RS1.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone have questions for the staff? All right, we're going to open it up for public comment. If you wish to speak on this case, please come forward, state your name and single member district or address. All right, we're going to close public comment. Anyone have questions or comments or wish to make a motion?
I move that we accept as presented.
I second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented by the staff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Do we need to vote to make motions on separate cases, since these are 2 different cases?
Yes, you do. Item 1, I think you just approved, so now you just have to go ahead and.
Okay, so if you guys could amend your motion, the first would be to accept or reject the comprehensive plan, and the second would be the rezoning.
I so move that.
I second the motion.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the changes to the comprehensive plan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. And then,
I move that we approve as presented for the rezoning of the
Okay.
ranch and estate, correct?
yes.
I second the motion.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve rezoning from ranch and estate to single family for the same tract. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. All right. 3202 and 3206 Abilene Street. This is 2 cases as well. CP 2203, 3202, and 3206 Abilene Street, a request for approval of an amendment to the comprehensive plan, changing certain lands from neighborhood center to residential future land use, being .322 acres, located at 3202 and 3206 Abilene Street, and Z 2209, 3202 and 3206 Abilene Street, a request for approval of a rezoning from general commercial to the single-family residential zoning district, being .322 acres, located at 3202 and 3206 Abilene Street.
Rafael Alvarado. This is CP 22-03 and Z 22-09. The lots total, 0.322 acres. They are located to the north of the Houston Hart Highway at the northwest corner of the Alexander and Abilene Street intersection. They're in District 2, the Tom Thompson, in the Bluffs neighborhood. So currently, the lands are designated as Neighborhood Center and General Commercial Zone District. There is a request to build single-family residential homes on the lots, and in order to do so, the applicant came forward with a proposal to amend the zoning and the comp plan designation for the land. So it would become single-family residential and a neighborhood future land use designation. It'll essentially merge it with the existing neighborhood to the north. This is the notification map for the subject properties. We have not received any letters in opposition or support. There were 22 letters mailed out. These are the site images. The two lots in question are these two. The neighborhood, the existing neighborhood is relatively built out, with the exception of the properties fronting Houston Hart. And I would imagine that being due to the zone change that occurred 20 years ago, which changed the classification of these lands. So staff, we conducted a analysis and we recommend approval of CP 22-03 and Z 22-09 for the properties addressed as 3202 and 3206 Abilene Street, being 0.328 acres, or 0.322 acres, I believe. Yeah, 322. There are 0 conditions to straight approval.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
Anyone have questions for the staff? Thank you, Raphael. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Anyone wish to speak on this case, please come forward. I'm going to close public comment. This looks pretty straightforward. It's got neighborhood all around it. The frontage on Houston Hart is commercial, but I think these lots being residential would be appropriate, considering the surrounding development. Anyone else have thoughts or wish to make a motion?
Second.
Okay, wait.
No, do these separate.
Got to do this like we did the last one. So the comprehensive plan. We need a motion for the comprehensive plan change and for the zoning change.
Can I do it in one motion? Do two separate?
Yeah, two separate's probably cleaner.
Move to approve the amendment to the comprehensive plan, changing from neighborhood center to residential future land use.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve changes to the comprehensive plan for this case. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0.
Okay, move to approve rezoning from general commercial to single family RS1.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to rezone as the staff's recommended from general commercial to single family for these lots. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Conditional uses. Planning Commission has final authority for approval of conditional uses. Appeals may be directed to the City Council. Item A, CU 2208, 5046 Red Oak Lane. Request for approval of a conditional use to allow a bed and breakfast in the single-family residential zoning district located at 5046 Red Oak Lane. Mr. Warren.
Yes, sir. Chair Stribling. She did make a motion, or did send an email to table that to the May 16th meeting. Just because of all the opposition we got on that one, and I did tell her that Friday, and I gave you the email before the meeting on that one. So.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the applicant has filed a request with the city to table this case until the next meeting. Does anyone wish to make a motion?
Move to table.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to table CU 2208. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0. CU 2209, 1223 Dorchester Drive. Request for approval of a conditional use. Oh, goodness. Sorry, folks. Give everyone a chance to clear out.
Holy smoke. Guess there's gonna be a lot of discussion
There's
on
a
that.
lot of opposition, I think. All right, CU 2209, 1223 Dorchester Drive. Request for approval of a conditional use to allow short-term rental in the zero lot line, twin home and townhome residential RS3 zoning district located at 1223 Dorchester Drive.
Good morning, Commission. Kyle Warren, Planning and Development. As Chair Stribling just said, it's a request for approval of a short-term rental conditional use. It's RS3 zoning, twin home zoning, District 6, Larry Miller, in the Bluffs neighborhood. And over here is the aerial image of the location. This is the image of the house. It does have ample off-street parking here. And this is the neighborhood that it's in, just showing its residential nature. And this is our notification map. 27 notices were mailed out. We had 4 back in opposition. Though I will say there was one phone call I had Thursday of a man strongly opposed to this and said he would tell the others around this area to send me more letters of opposition. To this morning, I didn't get any more, just the 4 that I had. No phone calls or emails as well. But I did tell him that if there are any complaints with this short-term rental within the year, they will not be able to renew after that. So all the same. My rationale is that this remains residential in nature and it was not within 500 feet of any existing short-term rentals. Also, the rental is in an RS3 zone, which is higher density, which is more favorable for that kind of use. We believe there are not any effects on the natural environment. As I stated earlier, there is plenty of off-street parking at this location. I would say there's a need in the Bluffs area as there are no short-term rentals right now. And the development pattern would remain residential in nature on this one. And our recommendation is for the commission to approve a conditional use to allow short-term rental at 1223 Dorchester Drive, subject to 3 conditions of approval. Maintain all off-street parking on the premise. Maintain the short-term rental operation in a manner consistent with the zoning ordinance, including a required renewal after the first year and then every 2 years after. And we'll need a fire marshal inspection and building inspection for a change of occupancy. Any further questions?
Anyone have questions for the staff? Can you go back a few slides to the aerial? It looked like you
Yes, sir.
had 4 in opposition.
That's correct.
Did you receive any letters or emails?
These are the letters. I got, I think, 2 emails and 2 letters, and the phone call I received also sent in a letter, so he's been noted.
I don't think that we have copies of any of that information. Can you explain the context and nature by which these applicants are opposed to this rezoning? Or this use?
Well, sometimes they don't give an explanation. They just, because we mail out the notifications, it has a box that says opposed or in favor. Sometimes
Right.
they just send it back opposed, and we don't know the reasoning for it. But I do have those stubs and emails if you want proof of this. I apologize.
No, I don't need to see them physically unless, I wanted to see if there was specific reasoning for opposing.
Right, and it is.
Or if they just indicated
sometimes
that
it
they
is
opposed.
frustrating on our end too, because we can't give a further explanation sometimes. But I will say the man that I did have a phone conversation with, who was in opposition for this, he said, well, you know, this brings in crime, this brings in people we don't know, they're throwing parties, that kind of thing, which, you know, could potentially happen. I'm not going to deny that, but as I stated, if there's any code violations or any PD calls within a year, then they will not be able to renew their short-term rental after that.
Right.
They have to maintain a clean record. And that's what I told him, and he kind of, you know, was more understanding after that, but nonetheless, he was very opposed to this, so. I personally feel on the fence with this one, but in a technical sense, they can still go forward. But I mean, in our sense of approval, it's not within 500 feet of another short-term rental, and it's residential in nature. And they have off-street parking to allow for anyone to come and go on it, so.
Yeah, Kyle's right, and this is the challenge we've had before, where it meets all the minimum criteria, and it's appropriate, and we believe it's appropriate, but then, of course, sometimes you'll get opposition. Again, people see it as rentals, and they get worried, things like that, but it still meets the minimum technical criteria, so it's really up to you to weigh the opposition from the residents versus them meeting the criteria that staff outlined.
Okay. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Does anyone wish to speak on this case?
Chase Bruton, I live at 4902 Red Oak Lane. I think this kind of falls with the prior motion for bed and breakfast. Your opposition to this, I don't see it any different than a long-term rental. Everybody's going to have some opposition to neighbors, but everybody knows you cannot pick your neighbor. So private property ownership allows you to do, within certain limitations, what you want to do on your own property. So as long as it's not changing any zoning requirements, moving it from residential status to commercial, I don't see anything wrong with any differentiation from a private owner doing a long-term rental or a short-term rental. So I'm just leaving that as it is. Take any consideration of opposition as well, but it doesn't matter. Any of the opposition to me as a private owner is that you don't want to infringe on private property ownership rights as long as it meets all the necessary requirements. So,
thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment. I've had the privilege of serving up here for a while, and the short-term rental discussion was hotly debated a couple of years ago. I feel like we did a good job of ensuring compliance when we passed the ordinances to allow them in neighborhoods. There's no signage allowed on the property to advertise or indicate that the property is a short-term rental. And in many regards, as I've said before, I think that short-term rentals are safer and better neighbors than long-term rentals. We have regular fire and building inspections that are done on these properties. We have reviews. I think it's 1 year after the initial application and then 2 years thereafter. So if there are nuisance calls to the police department or code compliance issues, we're going to review and consider those before we allow a property like this to continue to operate as a short-term rental. So I wouldn't mind having a short-term rental as a neighbor if it was proposed in my neighborhood. And so on that basis, I don't see any extenuating circumstances with this case in terms of thin walls or, density that would create an issue here. So personally, I'm in favor of making this a short-term rental.
I agree with you. There's so many things that they have to qualify for or meet that it's actually a good thing. It's probably better than a long-term rental, actually.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, they also have to maintain the property.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to rent it if you don't keep it in pretty good order.
So,
long-term rentals
sometimes
don't have those requirements.
Right, exactly.
So, okay. Does anyone wish to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. CU 22-10, 418 South Adams Street, a request for approval of a conditional use to allow short-term rental in the single-family residential zoning district located at 418 South Adams Street.
versus Rafael Alvarado for CU 2210, 418 South Adams Street. The property is 0.193 acres, located near the Live Oak and Adams Street intersection in District 5, Karen Hesse Smith, the Santa Rita neighborhood. The property is in a neighborhood future land use and a single-family residential zone. We have received one letter in opposition and one letter in support for this case. I apologize, I don't have the letter in opposition, but the letter in support didn't mention any comments.
Is the letter in opposition within the notification area?
Yes.
Do you know which property?
No, I don't remember, actually. I apologize.
Okay. Did they provide any comments in opposition?
No, there were no comments.
Okay.
I did receive some phone calls outside of the notification area regarding this case in opposition, but them being outside the notification area didn't, and they didn't provide any other documentation. It was just a phone call.
Okay.
These are the images of the site. On the right-hand side is the home, and on the left-hand side is the image away from the site. So from our report, we found that it's close by to the river, and it's nearby to other amenities. There's no other short-term rentals within 500 feet. And like we've mentioned before, a short-term rental will actually sort of increase the upkeep of the property, and so it'll decrease the effect on the natural environment. There seems to be a community need, seeming as though we've received multiple of these applications, and it's already a residential neighborhood. Making this property a conditional use for a short-term rental would not change that. Staff recommends approval of CU 22-10, 418 South Adams Street, subject to 3 conditions of approval. The first being that the owner shall obtain a certificate of occupancy for the short-term rental from Permits and Inspections Division. The second condition is that the owner shall obtain and comply with an annual fire safety inspection by the City Fire Marshal's Office. The third condition is that the property owner shall maintain the short-term rental operation in a manner consistent with the Section 406 of the zoning ordinance, to include adherence to periodic reviews and subsequent permit renewals. Are there any other questions for staff?
Anyone have questions for the staff? Thank you, Rafael. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Anyone wish to speak on this case, please come forward, state your name and address or single member district. I'm going to close public comment. Anyone wish to share their thoughts or make a motion?
I move that we approve as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Discussion item. Discussion on adopting a new downtown historic overlay zone generally located north of Concho River, east of North Irving Street, south of East 4th Street, and west of South Oaks.
All right, thank you all. We're going to keep this brief today. This is a discussion, but we did want your input on it. Staff had worked with a consultant, and we had looked at preserving some of our buildings downtown, and we looked at several different areas. And so the Chatburn corridor, which is this area in red here, is the area that we looked at. So the purple area is already designated in our downtown overlay zone. Any buildings or properties there that are doing exterior improvements, so new construction or repainting or whatever, would already go through a review process. But as you can see, some of the yellow buildings, there are some that are historically designated already, but we never really had a comprehensive district. And so staff had retained a consultant, HHM, back in, I believe, 2020, and they did a report. And so we've taken this now to DHRC. Before we make any final suggestions or recommendations, we wanted to start as a discussion item today to get your input. I've got some talking points on the last slide to go through, but let me just give you the quick context of this. So HHM and Associates were contacted September 2020. They were commissioned, and then they provided us with a very extensive report on all of the properties downtown. And so we looked at about 4 different areas that they thought could be historical. The one that we picked that was probably had the most high priority in historical buildings, and everyone knows it, is Chadbourne Street. So basically from the river up to about 3rd Street and 1 block over on either side, that area would be could become a historical district and would get a higher standard of review process than what it is now, than just being in the downtown zone. So there's 3 different types of buildings in those areas. There's a high, medium, and a low. So the high are buildings that usually been there more than 50 years. They're eligible for National Historic. So these are the ones that they've been preserved in their original look and shell. The medium, they've been altered a little bit, so they're not eligible for the National Registry, but again, they're still contributing historic. And then there's the low, the non-contributing right now, which are still in the historic district. So I guess one talking point is, it came up, so we had a town hall on this as well, and some of the comments came back on that. So I think one question is going to be, do we treat the low different than the medium or the high, et cetera? Anything that's in a historical district is going to require a certificate of appropriateness. So that's actually going to go to the DHRC. And again, currently they're in the downtown district, so they need a review anyway. So this is the map they provided. So those little dots, the red is the high, the orange is the medium, and the yellow is the low. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but that's basically the area there. So we did our town hall on March the 2nd, and we got some feedback. So it had already gone to council for a quick review and endorsement, downtown San Angelo, and then DHRC. So now we'll eventually bring it back to you all. For the town hall, the notices we sent out, 142 properties are in the area. And again, about 30 are already designated. So really it's about 102 properties really that are going to become designated so that the whole thing is. 3 were in support, 2 were neutral. One of those was not within the boundary, and then there were 3 in opposition. I think just given the town hall, some of the people were just concerned again about private property rights. The people who were opposed, making sure that, hey, if we have to, what kind of constraints are put on our property if we go to redevelop. And then the people in favor like it because, again, there's advantages to that in terms of protecting your property values. If everyone goes through the process and keeps their buildings looking tidy, then it's more of an incentive for the next person along. So that's kind of the both sides to it. So just some discussion points. We just wanted your feedback today. Like I said, we're not voting on anything. One is, are we comfortable with the new boundary? The consultant had given different recommendations in their report, and one of them was we could do the whole boundary. The other part is we just take the ones that are high or medium. I think at this time we're looking at doing the whole thing, but if you guys had any comments to the boundary. The second question is, in terms of review standards, should the contributing properties, so those are the high and the medium, get a higher standard than the low? And again, right now, everything that's historic does the same thing. They all need a certificate of appropriateness. There's 10 criteria in the zoning ordinance that the Design Historic Review Commission looks at. So really, I guess you're looking at, is this appropriate? This would become an overlay zone. So their underlying zoning, if they're zoned CBD, they'll still be allowed to have a bakery or a restaurant, but now there'll be design control on the buildings from the outside. So I don't think we're as strict as, say, Fredericksburg or parts of Austin, but we want to make sure that our downtown is protected. Should the downtown district overlay zone standards also apply? What we're doing right now is, if you have any buildings that are historical and in the downtown overlay, the historical stricter. So we're just waiving one fee in one application and just charging for the historic. Maybe that's the case here, but do the lower priority ones maybe do the downtown review, and then the higher ones do the historical. So there's some things there. And then fourthly, do we want to look at an administrative process? I know when I did my research, San Antonio has that, and everything right now that's historic has to go to the DHRC and get approved through a certificate of appropriateness. Whereas if you have a downtown approval, like the current downtown zoning, it's a little less strict than this historical. Some of those minor things like paint color, our director can approve. But anything historical, like if you put a lamp post or a sign on it or anything, has to go to the board. So do we want to look at making this a little bit simpler? I don't think we have all the final answers yet, but we really value your input. Like I say, this will have to come back hopefully as early as next month for a vote and then on to city council. So it's not a zoning, but in a sense it is. It's an overlay district. So the planning commission would have to vote to recommend approval, and then it would go on to council, just like a zoning change. So any questions or comments? And we do have downtown San Angelo and our managers here if we had any other questions.
I mean, to me, the biggest hangup I have over the whole thing is having an additional layer of bureaucracy for a property owner to have to go through to make improvements to their building. I understand the point, but along the lines of, on your question 4, I think administrative approval, I would definitely be in support of, just because it would simplify the process.
I agree. And I think that the way that it could be achieved is with very clear guidelines that are made available to everybody.
And I wanted to just point out on the guidelines. So if you're a historical property right now, we look at two things. Well, at least one. The one is that there's 10 criteria in the zoning ordinance. That meets the Department of the Interior national standards, and that's what most cities use. So we have that 10 criteria every month when we go to a DHRC case that we always look at. And then these properties, except for the north 2 blocks, which we're thinking of maybe bringing that up a bit, there is a CB, Central Business District historic guidelines in addition to those 10 criteria that we review for DHRC cases. We don't always review them thoroughly though, but those criteria in there look at everything from like windows to doors. There's a color palettes as well that we look at. So if it was made in, the building was like in the 1900s, there's a color palette for the 1900s that we could look at, or anything from 1950s on. So I think keeping those standards, and when I looked at some of the bigger cities, ours are really good. We just need, I think, to be clear and consistent so that customers understand it maybe, but I think those guidelines are already written for us, and so we can apply those.
As long as the guidelines are clear, I think you can take more latitude with administrative approval if the guidelines are written clearly. It takes some of the burden of review off of the DHRC. If you have guidelines that are clear and someone's following the guidelines with whatever they've submitted, I don't know why the administrative approval process wouldn't be appropriate. That's how clear I think the guidelines need to be. I would be as specific as you can in the guidelines so that there's a clear understanding of what the rules are within the district. And if you have a clear understanding in writing of the guidelines within the district and someone's following those guidelines, then there's really no need to have the review process of the DHRC. And the DHRC would serve as a great platform for folks that want to vary from those guidelines if there's an extenuating circumstance, just like we review variances from subdivision ordinances, variances from the downtown standards. If they're clear guidelines, I think would kind of serve as the primary role for the DHRC, instead of them having to review everything that's coming through.
Yeah.
Take that burden off of them, but maybe more importantly, have it written clearly enough where someone can read through a book and say, okay, I can do this to my building and comply, or if I don't want to do this, I got to go through the process with the DHRC and get variances from it. That's my feedback.
Okay.
Jeff, do you have any feedback from the DHRC? I mean, is this a big issue with folks out there trying to paint and make changes? Or, I mean, are they getting 100 complaints a month, or are they getting one a year? from the owners. I mean, how big is this? Because I totally agree with the administrative process, but, I mean, you mailed it out, I think it was to, I don't remember how many, 160 or something?
142.
142.
142.
I mean, is there that much pushback right now? I mean, it seems pretty clear cut.
Yeah, the town hall was sort of a general overview. I think the problem is we try our best, so we'll send those letters out. We don't always get responses. We did have, put it on social media as well and to our external email providers to get some more people interested. So we had an okay turnout, but I think most of the people against, from what I remember from our town hall and the letters, it's back to the same argument, private property rights. I don't want to be told what to do on my buildings. And then the people in support, and I think staff's position is, on the other hand, it's obviously preserving those buildings. One of the other things with, once it's historical, they can't just come in and demolish the building. So right now, even though it's in the downtown district and has a design control, there's no stopping, like if it's an older building or whatever, unless it's got a federal plaque on it, I don't think we can stop them from demolishing it. So that's probably one of the biggest reasons we want to do historical preservation, but also for the upkeep and to make downtown attractive.
But those are comments. When the rubber meets the road, how many people are coming into your office and, really, fussing over everything that's occurring? Is it that many?
Not a lot. I think the problem is that the fuss starts when they come in with a building permit or an application, and then they're told, oh, I'm in the historic. A lot of people don't, from my experience, they don't even know they're designated historical.
1 a year, 2 a year? It doesn't look like it's, I don't, not to make this bigger than it really is. I mean, because, I agree with everything that was said. Let's try to, get a director to approve it and make it as easy as we can. But, for the properties in question, I just don't see that kind of activity unless you're seeing it from your side, because I don't have
There's also a lot of challenges with those buildings.
Yes.
Is there?
Just the age.
Yes.
In
Oh, yes. No,
construction.
Asbestos abatement, fire life safety.
I was about to say, I deal with them a lot with fire sprinklers, and that's one of the biggest deals. They go, okay, never mind.
Major challenge.
And so I'm apprehensive on restricting them even more, because there's already so many challenges. That would be my only holdback, would be anything that restricts them more. Even though I understand, you gotta preserve them, you gotta help.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's kind of a slippery, touchy.
I think if we're gonna try to preserve this area and be consistent with the development, I think predictability is important from a developer's mindset for, going into one of these areas. You gotta know the rules. If there's ambiguity, it discourages investment. And that's why I think having clear written standards for this area is so important. I know I'm beating a drum here, but to me, that's really what it comes down to. Have a vision for it, be consistent about it, put it in writing so that everyone can see it. And then if someone wants to vary from it, we can have all the debate and discussion we want. We can go to the DHRC, they can go deal with the city staff and fight through the process. But if you're playing by the rules and the rules are written clearly, it's easy. Just move on down the road.
I think San Angelo's sort of, from my experience here anyway, is kind of a middle ground. So the guidelines that are in place right now, the 10 criteria in the zoning, and then probably more so the CBD guidelines, they do say colors should be consistent with the color palette, and they will say quality materials as seen in the surrounding area. Now that, again, some of those things might be general, or like the arched windows.
Yeah.
Does that mean they always have to be arched windows, or maybe if the original building wasn't arched windows? But I think there's some, so it's a little bit loose because we don't want to tell everyone exactly what to do, but at the same time, I think the guidelines are there. I think it's just our communication
I think
getting
you're
those
better
guidelines.
if you have guidelines that tell people what to do and allow them to vary from it than you are to leave the guidelines ambiguous and up to the opinions of the DHRC or the city staff or any review commission. That's personally how I feel.
Do you think there should be 2 tiers of those guidelines? One for truly historical designated or contributing as under the definitions contributing, and a lower standard for those that are non-contributing, or is it pretty much coming down to color and changes, and that's what DHRC is for?
What about, I mean, this scenario, and I think this is probably the case in quite a few buildings downtown, where they're basically useless for redevelopment because of whatever constraints they have as far as the dilapidation of the building or whatever options are available because of the way they were constructed at the time, trying to bring them up to code now. So would putting these types of additional requirements on top of those prevent even further possibility of someone coming in and redeveloping those at some point in the future?
Right, and that's one of the things we've looked at is that maybe again, this is not a final decision or anything, but maybe the high and the medium where they're buildings themselves and the shells and the exteriors are already historical, maybe those get the higher standard, because the low priority in the consultant report that I read was more like, okay, they don't look, they're completely dilapidated or they've been primarily destroyed. There might be some elements left, but these are the ones that are low because they've been torn up so much from the original. But again, so maybe they get a lesser control, but I think our concern is not doing anything is a problem, because then A, they can get demolished and then without a review, and then B, without any design control, we can't do anything to make it improved.
And I think our goal is to look at what the architecture speaks at the time it was built, but at the same time, what is their concept and what's going to, if it's unstructurally sound and they have to change the architecture for some reason, there may be a reason to do that.
Absolutely.
And then it really kind of comes down to, people have opinions about stone and brick, painted, not painted. Again, that's back to guidelines. What do we say for certain buildings? Paint might be a great improvement. For others, maybe not.
Yeah.
That's the hard thing it's hard to legislate of, hey, this is exactly it on every building.
Well, okay, here's the other thing I think that guidelines would help with. The DHRC, if you don't have good guidelines and you take a case into the DHRC, it becomes personal. It's, what do you think of this aesthetic?
Completely subjective.
Completely subjective. If you have good guidelines, you guys can go in and say, it varies from the guideline here, it varies from the guideline here. And you get specific about where the departures are from the intent of the development in that area. And then you can be specific about whether you want to approve it or not. It becomes binary, yes or no. Yes, paint brick, no paint brick. I mean, I think the simpler you can make it and the better the guidelines are, the better it is for everybody in making the decisions. And yes, you can have variances from it. You can grant, there are exceptions to all of the rules. But to be able to speak clearly about where those variances are and why we're granting them, what's the hardship in this case? What are the extenuating circumstances for this building that allow us to vary? That's a good discussion. And we're not saying it's going to be prevented. We're just saying these are the guidelines and this is what they want to do. Do we agree with it? To me, that's what the DHRC should be there for. But you can't do that if you don't have really strong guidelines.
Yeah.
Jeff, is the intent to take these older buildings and just look at the facade, the outside? Because I know, doing, new construction versus old construction, it's very, very expensive to do old construction. Trying to get it to the fire control, the electrical. We're in one of the older buildings and all the electrical needs to be replaced, the plumbing and everything else, and it becomes almost cost prohibitive. Are we looking at anything through the DHRC or through any entity, how we can help these owners migrate or navigate through that, extra expense?
Yeah, so the guidelines will only look at exterior improvements. There are, I don't want to get into that today because we're really talking about zoning, but there are like tax abatements and credits and all those other sort of incentive programs separately that they could look into.
And the tiers money.
And tiers, so yeah, that's the big one.
So when someone comes in, is all of that discussed with them? I mean, I know you're talking about colors and everything else, but are we working with them, giving them a laundry list that says, these is some of the assistance that's available to you?
Yeah, normally what we try to do with these projects, correct me, Aaron, like we'll try to get them in for a consultation or a pre-development meeting called a Dhrc, and then we'll sit down with them, and if we notice that it's in a tiers area, we will probably recommend that to them to say, hey, you know what, you can get tiers funding for this, or hey, here's the process, you know, you need to go to the Dhrc for the exterior improvements and things like that, or, you know, building permits are needed or any interior work. So yeah, that we'll try to help them along for sure.
Yeah, I agree with Travis. The more strict, the more concrete you have. But what I'm fussing with is how do you make it a positive? Follow these guidelines, and by the way, we will support, you know, through these different grants or tiers money or whatever is available to help you through it. So if we could marry the two, strict guidelines, but with some additional support in the document, I think that would help. Because right now, I mean, just to redo our wiring, or the plumbing is almost, you know, it'd be easier to tear it down and start over.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I was going with my question as well. I mean, I definitely understand the benefit and the consistency in having a zone, but I know the condition that a lot of those buildings are in, and so I don't know how you try to balance that. And I think maybe that's where you're going with the different tiers and requirements, but at the same time, that adds a layer or a level of complication.
It does.
And where's I mean, how do you define, I guess we've had this consultant firm define high, medium, and low.
Right. I think staff and probably the mayor in downtown San Angelo, we're good with the boundary, I think is our position. I think that, so number one is probably okay, because even the ones that are low priority might become high priority, or at least once they're in the district. The biggest thing is once they're in the district, they can't just get knocked down. So they have to go at least protect the shell of the building, and then we could debate design, you know.
So Chairman, when you're talking guidelines, obviously they're looking at how do we do this overlay zone, not I mean, part of it is how do we apply those guidelines that we currently have?
Yes.
Are we talking two different discussions of, hey, we need to work on our guidelines and work through those guidelines, whether that's through DHRC or here?
And I haven't reviewed the guidelines, so I can't, I can't speak specifically about how clear the guidelines are.
Yeah.
I'm speaking in broader terms.
Yeah.
From a developer standpoint, I think if you have a rule book that you can hand to somebody that says, these are the rules to play in this area, and they can read them and study them and say, okay, I can do this or I can't, that, to me, that predictability encourages development. If instead, you have really vague rules and it's, you gotta go down and talk to the city. Oh, and you gotta go to the DHRC and convince those guys that it's a good, that discourages folks, I think, from moving forward because it's just the unknown. It's the, and if you have to go through the process, what are the chances that someone else is gonna go through that process? Right. It just becomes overwhelming, I think, to many. So.
Yeah, and that kind of answers your question, Trinidad. We do certainly try to give them as much information as we can, but as you know, as a developer yourself, it can be information overload, and we gotta find ways to give them the right information that still gives flexibility to them, but also in a condensed way that we're just not overloading them. And when you get a chance to, I think even downtown San Angelo probably has some comments on that and even guidelines and some suggestions. But I think, as Jeff's mentioning, just getting some good guidance like we're getting.
It's not, these are guidelines. These aren't rules.
Yeah.
These are guidelines. So if you work within those guidelines, then green light, go right ahead. If you don't, if you vary from those guidelines, then you can be specific about why you're varying.
Right.
When you have those discussions with the staff and the boards and commissions that need to review the project. I think it gives a clearer message to everybody about what's trying to be done than to not have clear guidelines.
Yeah.
Clear guidelines, leave it, that ambiguity is the unknown that scares everybody, I think.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we appreciate that. I don't know if Mr. Velazquez had any comments on it from downtown San Angelo, but I know he's been working with us, and we
Yeah.
appreciate his support.
I'll go.
Okay, go ahead.
One thing, in terms of the cost that you're referencing, Luke, property owners, people who are already vested or looking into investing will look into that, and they'll make a decision based on the economics of the situation, whether they move forward or not. The district is to bring some unification and relationship to our historic elements that we have in downtown. That's what we're trying to accomplish, that's all. And none of the rules that are already, I mean, the majority, if not all the rules, are already in place now. We're not really changing anything. All we're doing is trying to protect the district at a different level, at a new level. So that's really the crux of it in relationship to that. So I trust that people who are looking into buying in downtown or doing anything in downtown are going to be doing their homework, I hope, so that they know what they're getting into. But you're right, all those elements that you all have discussed are there. They're in plain view. There's no hidden agendas there. Any questions?
And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that the city's hiding the information. I don't know that it's as readily available as we would all like for it to be, and I'm sure that that's an easy fix.
And I mean, folks, I hear it every day. I talk to people every day, and you'll be surprised what they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And a lot of people don't do their homework. And so the good news is a lot of times they come to downtown San Angelo, and I can try to help them work through those processes. And then the city has the Dhrc, which we have every week. And I highly recommend everybody that comes in to let's set up a Dhrc meeting, let's have this discussion so that you'll know exactly what's going to happen and there's no discrepancy. And even when you do that, there's still some controversial elements that play into it. So there's no clear cut. I wish we lived in that world, but it's not. It's not reality.
Can't be.
Yeah.
It's just not possible.
It's not.
I mean,
you'd be surprised how people miss information, and right there in front of them.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks, Del.
Yes, sir.
All right. You got what you want from us?
I think so. No, we appreciate that. Those are good talking points, and we expect this will probably come back soon.
All right. Public comment. Issues or concerns not on the regular agenda may be raised at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the dais, and begin by stating their name and address or single-member district. Please limit all remarks to less than 3 minutes. So, open public comment for the Planning Commission. Anyone wish to speak, please come forward. All right, I'm going to close public comment. The only thing I'm going to add from the public comment section, every time we see these cases, some of which, like the bed and breakfast case, the notification area remains a concern of mine. And I think that there are a lot of cases that we review and discuss that impact more than the state's minimum requirement for a notification area. And I think we should try to visit expanding those notification areas to encourage the public to come in, especially if they're in opposition of something, to get notice so that they know what's going on around them. Anyone else have thoughts? All right. The director's report.
Not a whole lot today with John being out. As you saw with our plats today, we had a number of plats that maybe the road was not to the 26 feet minimum standard.
Yes.
And we as staff are, as it being kind of new, hey, this is our hard line, trying to really wrestle with, the one even in Lakeview that the longest side of the property was one property, maybe 170 feet. Well, the ordinance says we should deny that. And so we are struggling with that a little bit, and it's not that we're against the applicants, but we are trying to really say, all right, well, if it's 26 feet and that's what city council has said, we're trying to really dial into that. Obviously, y'all have the ability to grant variances as y'all see fit and reasons why. We're just trying to, over the next few months, we'll probably still keep trying to dial into, all right, what makes sense for every type of application that comes in.
I think it's one of the greatest challenges that you guys face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sidewalks and curb and gutter were a great debate, and I think that's been largely addressed.
Yeah.
In these cases where we're expanding, where we have a narrow road and someone's replatting but not necessarily redeveloping, I don't personally see a need to
No, but
widen the
I think
road.
y'all did the right thing you brought for us. Yeah, we can grant that. You
Yeah.
know, vote on it. Yeah, is it elementary? It kind of seems like it, but at the same time too, that's
Right.
what we're here for and that's what.
We appreciate your position, we understand. And I think you're doing the right thing, you have to follow the ordinance, and that's why the process exists today.
Certainly. So our staff's been, Kyle and Raphael's been learning, not quite a full year, but we're still excited that they're still here. They're working, and they're starting to get bigger cases. You'll start seeing them start doing some different cases, and so we're very excited with them, as well as with Zach being our manager and doing everything that he's been working with them on. So we look forward to great things coming up this summer.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for what you do.
Yep.
I know it's not easy. Future meeting and agenda announcements, excuse me. The next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. on Monday, May 16th, 2022. Adjournment. Does anyone wish to make a motion?
So move.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0. It's 10:47.